When a little girl at Starbucks cries out, the stunned father can't explain why a stranger looks exactly like his late wife. Until buried truths, broken hearts, and a past connection neither expected rise to the surface, leaving everyone asking, is this fate or a haunting coincidence that could change everything? Daddy, she looks like Mommy. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The snow fell in fat, lazy flakes against the windshield as Daniel Carter pulled into the Starbucks parking lot. His delivery truck rumbled to a stop, the engine ticking in the cold December air. Can we get hot chocolate with extra marshmallows? Ella bounced in her booster seat, her breath fogging the window where she'd pressed her nose. Daniel checked his watch. 7:30. If they hurried, he could still drop her at school and make his first delivery on time. Quick stop only. Bug. The warmth hit them like a wall when they pushed through the door. Christmas music drifted over the hum of conversation and the hiss of espresso machines. The place was packed. Holiday shoppers clutching shopping bags, business people scrolling phones, a group of moms laughing over skinny vanilla lattes. They joined the line snaking toward the counter. Ella tugged off her purple mittens and stuffed them in her pockets, then grabbed Daniel's hand. Her fingers were still cold. Smell that? She tilted her head back. Cinnamon! That's the holiday drinks. Daniel shuffled forward as the line moved. His mind was already on the day's route. 12 stops before lunch, another 15 after. The transmission in the truck was making that grinding noise again. Another expense he couldn't afford. Ella swung their joined hands back and forth, humming along to silver bells playing overhead. She'd been doing that more lately. Humming. Singing little songs under her breath. Rebecca used to do the same thing, especially when she was next. They moved up. Only 2 people ahead now. Daniel could see the baristas working behind the counter, a blur of green aprons and practiced movements. Steam rose from the milk frothers. Ella went quiet. Her hand tightened in his. She rose up on her tiptoes, staring past the customers in front of them. Daddy. Her voice came out strange, breathless. She tugged his sleeve hard, pointing straight ahead. Daddy, she looks like Mommy. The words rang out clear and sharp, cutting through the coffee shop chatter like a blade through tissue paper. Conversations died mid-sentence. The woman in front of them turned around. Even the espresso machine seemed to pause. Daniel's gaze followed Ella's pointing finger to the barista working the register. Auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, wisps escaping to frame her face. Hazel eyes that caught the overhead lights. The way she tucked that loose strand behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it knocked the air from his lungs. The gentle curve of her smile as she handed change to a customer. The room tilted, his knees locked, his mouth went dry. Because Ella was right. God help him, she was right. The resemblance wasn't just passing. It was Rebecca in the tilt of her head, Rebecca in the shape of her lips, Rebecca in the way she moved with quiet grace between the register and the coffee machines. Next, please. The couple in front of them stepped aside. Daniel's feet wouldn't move. Daddy? Ella pulled him forward. The barista, her name tag read Grace, looked up with that same gentle smile. Her eyes found Ella first, then lifted to Daniel. Something flickered across her face. Recognition? No, that wasn't possible. Good morning. What can I get started for you? Daniel's throat closed. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Ella filled the silence. I want hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and whipped cream and chocolate drizzle. She pressed against the counter, still staring. You look just like my Mommy. She's in heaven. Grace's professional smile faltered. Her eyes softened, moving between Ella's earnest face and Daniel's stricken one. The entire cafe seemed to lean in, holding its collective breath. Well? Grace's voice came out gentle. She moved around the counter and knelt to Ella's height, her movements fluid and familiar. That's a very special thing to say. Your Mommy must have been beautiful. She was. Ella nodded solemnly. Daddy has pictures. You have the same hair and the same eyes, and you smile the same way she did when she made pancakes." Daniel found his voice rough and strangled. "Ella?" "It's okay." Grace looked up at him, and for a moment, just a moment, it was Rebecca kneeling there, Rebecca's understanding in those hazel eyes. She turned back to Ella. "How about I make you the best hot chocolate you've ever had? Extra everything." "Really?" "Really." Grace stood, smoothing her apron. "And for Dad?" "Large coffee, black." The words came out automatic, robotic, coming right up. She moved to the machines, and Daniel watched her work, his chest tight. The way she pumped the chocolate syrup, the careful mountain of whipped cream she built on Ella's cup, the little smile when she added extra chocolate drizzle in a heart pattern. "Here you go, sweetheart." She handed Ella the cup with both hands. "Careful, it's warm." "Thank you." Ella beamed. "Daddy, look," she made a heart. Grace passed Daniel his coffee. Their fingers brushed. Her skin was warm. "Have a wonderful day," she said softly. Daniel grabbed the cup in Ella's hand, practically dragging her toward the door. Behind them, conversation slowly resumed, but he felt the weight of watching eyes, heard the whispers starting. The cold air hit like a slap. He fumbled with the truck door, boosting Ella into her seat, his hands shaking. They drove in silence for 3 blocks. Then, as they stopped at a red light, Ella's small voice filled the cab. "Daddy?" She cradled her hot chocolate, steam rising between her mittened hands. "She really did look like Mommy, didn't she?" Daniel gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. In the rearview mirror he caught sight of his own haunted eyes. "Yeah, Bug." His voice cracked. "She did." The delivery truck rumbled beneath him, packages stacked high in the back, but Daniel barely registered the familiar weight shifts as he took the corner onto Maple Street. His hands moved on autopilot, signal, turn, check mirrors, while his mind stayed trapped in that Starbucks, hearing Ella's voice over and over. "She looks like Mommy." A horn blared. Daniel jerked the wheel, narrowly missing a parked car. His heart hammered against his ribs. He pulled into Mrs. Henderson's driveway, grabbed her package, and trudged to the door. She answered with her usual complaint about delivery times, but Daniel just nodded, already walking away before she finished talking. Back in the truck, memories crashed over him uninvited. Rebecca in her wedding dress, spinning in the church parking lot, laughing because they'd forgotten to cut the cake. Rebecca painting Ella's nursery at 2 a.m, humming worship songs with yellow paint in her hair. Rebecca in that hospital bed, her hand so small in his, whispering that God would take care of them. The truck lurched to a stop. Daniel's vision blurred. He white-knuckled the steering wheel, breathing hard through his nose until the world stopped spinning. His phone buzzed. Lunch break reminder. He parked behind the warehouse and dialed before he could think better of it. "Daniel?" Marion's warm voice filled the cab. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, He rubbed his face. "Something happened this morning." "Oh?" "We stopped at Starbucks. There was this barista, and Ella said—" The word stuck in his throat. She said the woman looked like Rebecca. Silence stretched between them. "And did she?" Marion asked gently. "Yeah." The admission came out raw. "She did. Same hair, same eyes, same everything. It was like seeing a ghost." "Oh, honey?" Ella wouldn't stop staring. Made a whole scene. Everyone in the place heard her announce that this stranger looked like her dead mother. "Daniel." Marion's voice carried that particular mix of sympathy and firmness she'd perfected over the years. "Maybe this isn't coincidence." His jaw tightened. "Don't. God works in mysterious ways. It's just a woman who happens to have auburn hair, who happens to look exactly like Rebecca, who happened to be working at the exact Starbucks you randomly decided to visit this morning. We were running late. It was convenient. Daniel Carter, I've known you 12 years. You plan everything. There's no such thing as random in your life." He had no answer for that. "Maybe," Marion continued softly, God is putting someone in your path for a reason. Maybe it's time to— To what? Replace her? To heal. To let joy back in, for you and for Ella. Daniel ended the call with a quick goodbye and spent the rest of his shift in silence, delivering packages like a man sleepwalking through his own life. And then Marcus threw up during art class, and it got on Jenny's shoes, and she screamed so loud that Principal Adams came running, and— Ella, eat your broccoli. She speared a piece with her fork, continuing her story through green-filled cheeks. And Miss Patterson said we could make Christmas ornaments tomorrow if everyone brings glitter and— Daniel stirred the mac and cheese on his own plate, barely tasting it. Ella's chatter usually anchored him, pulled him back from wherever his mind wandered. Tonight, it felt distant, like radio static from another room. The nice lady at Starbucks would like our Christmas ornaments. His fork stilled. We could make her one, with extra sparkles. Ella pushed her plate aside and pulled out her crayon box. I'm going to draw her. You need to finish dinner. I'm full. She was already hunched over a piece of paper, tongue poking out in concentration. Daniel watched her work. First came clouds, puffy white ones at the top of the page, then a figure with yellow hair and a triangle dress. Wings sprouted from her back. That's Mommy in heaven, Ella explained without looking up. Next, she drew another figure on the ground level, auburn hair, green apron, a big smile. And that's the Starbucks lady. She added a small figure between them, brown pigtails, pink dress. And that's me. The innocence of it knocked the breath from his lungs. In Ella's world, her mother and this stranger could coexist peacefully, separated only by clouds. See, Daddy? They both have the same smile. He cleared his throat. Time for bath. But I'm not done. Now, Bug. She splashed in the tub while he sat on the closed toilet lid, making sure she actually used soap. Afterward, in her pajamas with damp hair smelling of strawberry shampoo, she climbed into bed and patted the space beside her. Story? Which one? The one about the princess and the dragon. He told it the same way Rebecca used to, with voices and sound effects that made Ella giggle into her pillow. When he finished, she grabbed his hand before he could stand. Daddy? Yeah, Bug? Can we see the Starbucks lady again? His chest constricted. Maybe. Tomorrow? We'll see. She was nice. She made my hot chocolate special. I know. And she didn't laugh when I said she looked like Mommy. Marcus's mom would have laughed. Daniel smoothed her hair back from her forehead, the gesture automatic, practiced from 1,000 bedtimes. Good night, Bug. Night, Daddy? Love you to heaven and back. The phrase hit him like a physical blow, Rebecca's phrase. She'd said it every night, and now Ella carried it forward like a tiny torch in the darkness. He closed her door softly and walked to the living room on unsteady legs. The house felt too quiet, too empty, the way it always did after Ella went to sleep. He sank into his chair and found himself staring at the photo on the mantel, Rebecca at the lake, laughing at something off camera, sunset turning her hair to fire. The resemblance really was uncanny. Why now? The whisper escaped before he could stop it. 3 years? And why now? The photo, of course, had no answer. The next afternoon arrived with Ella bouncing in her booster seat before Daniel had even turned off the engine. Can we go to Starbucks? Please? I brought my drawing. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd hoped she'd forgotten. We have milk at home, but I want to show the nice lady my picture. Please, Daddy? I used my best crayons. Those eyes, Rebecca's eyes, pleaded with him from the rearview mirror. He lasted approximately 3 seconds. Just a quick stop. She cheered like he'd promised Disney World. The afternoon crowd was thinner, only a handful of people scattered at tables with laptops and books. The Christmas music played softer, and winter sunlight slanted through the windows, catching dust motes that danced like tiny angels. The barista was there. Of course she was there. She looked up from the espresso machine, and her face brightened with genuine warmth. "Well, hello there, hot chocolate girl." Ella practically vibrated with excitement. "You remembered? How could I forget? Extra whipped cream, right?" Grace came around the counter, wiping her hands on her green apron. She moved with easy confidence, but there was something gentle in her manner that made Daniel's chest ache. "I made something." Ella thrust the drawing forward with both hands. Grace knelt right there, on the coffee-stained floor, and took the paper with the reverence usually reserved for museum pieces. "Oh my goodness, is this? That's Mommy in heaven with wings, and that's you, and that's me in the middle." Daniel wanted to sink through the floor. He mumbled something about Ella having an active imagination, but Grace wasn't listening to him. Her attention was completely focused on his daughter. "This is beautiful. You're quite the artist." Mommy was an artist. She painted flowers and birds and sometimes people's faces. "I know." Grace's voice went soft. "I knew your mom." The words hit Daniel like cold water. "What?" Grace stood, still holding the drawing carefully. "Rebecca Carter, right? We took art history together at State, spring semester, junior year. Professor Williams?" The floor seemed to tilt. "You knew Rebecca?" "We studied together sometimes. She was brilliant, could remember every painting, every artist's backstory. She helped me pass that brutal final on Renaissance masters." Grace's smile turned wistful. "She talked about you all the time. Daniel this, Daniel that." She was completely smitten. Ella tugged on Grace's apron. "Did she talk about me?" "You weren't born yet, sweetheart. But she would have talked about you nonstop, I'm sure of it." Daniel's mind raced through memories, trying to place this woman in Rebecca's stories. Art history, junior year. Rebecca had mentioned study groups, but never specific names. Or had she? 3 years of grief had blurred so many details. "Small world," he managed. "Or divine timing." Grace handed the drawing back to Ella. "May I keep this? I'd love to hang it up." "Really?" Ella's eyes went wide. "Absolutely. Best art we've had in here all season." While Grace prepared their drinks, Daniel hadn't even ordered yet, but she seemed to know what they wanted, Ella chattered about school, about her teacher, Miss Patterson, about everything and nothing. Grace listened with the patience of someone who genuinely enjoyed children's rambling stories. "We're doing a Christmas play next Friday," Ella announced. "I'm an angel. I have wings and everything." "That sounds perfect for you." "You should come." "Daddy, can she come?" Daniel's automatic no died in his throat. Ella's face was so hopeful, so alive in a way he hadn't seen in months. "I'm sure she's busy." "I'd love to come," Grace said, handing him his coffee. Their fingers brushed. "If that's okay." "Please, Daddy." 2 sets of eyes, one hazel, one inherited from Rebecca, waited for his answer. "Sure, it's at 6:30, Maplewood Elementary." Grace's smile could have powered the entire shopping district. "I'll be there." They left with Ella walking backward, waving until Grace was out of sight. That evening, Daniel lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan's lazy rotation. Ella had fallen asleep clutching a second drawing she'd made, this one of Grace watching her Christmas play. She knew Rebecca. The thought wouldn't leave him alone. Of all the coffee shops in all the towns, what were the odds? Marion's words echoed. Maybe God is putting someone in your path for a reason. But that kind of thinking was dangerous. He'd learned that lesson already. You think God has a plan, you trust it, and then your wife gets diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at 32. You pray for miracles that don't come. You make bargains that go unanswered. Yet Ella's laughter today had sounded like music. Real, genuine joy that had been missing since... Number. He couldn't do this. Couldn't let some stranger waltz in and fill the Rebecca-shaped hole in their lives just because she had the same color hair and a kind smile. It wasn't fair to Ella. It wasn't fair to Rebecca's memory. But what if it wasn't about replacing? What if it was about something else entirely? The ceiling fan offered no answers, just continued its endless, quiet spinning through the dark. Saturday morning arrived with fresh snow dusting Maplewood streets like powdered sugar. Daniel had planned to avoid Starbucks, grocery shopping, maybe the library, but Ella had other ideas. "Please, Daddy?" I made another drawing for Miss Grace. Resistance was futile when those brown eyes pleaded. 20 minutes later, they pushed through the familiar glass door, bells chiming their arrival. Grace stood behind the counter, steam hissing, as she worked the espresso machine. She spotted them immediately, her face brightening. Ella practically vibrated with excitement, waving both arms like she was landing planes. Miss Grace, I brought you something." "Hold on, sweetheart. Let me grab my break." Grace turned to her co-worker. "Marcus, I'm taking my 15. She rounded the counter, untying her green apron. "Mind if I join you guys?" Daniel gestured to an empty chair at their corner table, trying to ignore how natural this felt, how dangerous that feeling was. Ella thrust her latest masterpiece across the table, a crayon explosion of angels, stars, and what appeared to be a coffee cup with wings. "It's you as a coffee angel." Grace laughed, a genuine sound that made other customers glance over with smiles. "This is definitely going on my fridge. I'm building quite the collection." "You really keep them?" "Every single one." While Ella colored on fresh napkins, Grace wrapped her hands around her own mug. Plain black coffee, Daniel noticed. No fancy drinks for her break. "So what brought you back to Maplewood?" The question escaped before Daniel could stop it. Grace's fingers traced the mug's rim. "Life implosion, basically. Engagement ended 6 months ago. Job was killing me. 70-hour week selling things nobody needs to people who don't want them. Woke up one morning and realized I'd become someone I didn't recognize." That's honest. Figured honesty's easier than maintaining fiction. She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Plus, Maplewood's home, or was. My mom passed 5 years ago, but this place still feels like her." Ella looked up from her coloring. "My mommy's in heaven, too." Maybe they're friends. Most adults would have fumbled, but Grace met Ella's eyes steadily. "I bet they are. Your mom was the kind of person everyone wanted to be friends with. Tell me about Mommy in college." Grace glanced at Daniel, checking permission. He nodded, despite the ache building in his chest. "Well, your mom once spent an entire weekend teaching me about Monet's garden paintings. I had this huge presentation, and I was completely lost. She brought colored pencils and graph paper and mapped out every painting's composition until it finally clicked. Mommy loved gardens." "She did." "She said gardens were proof that God was an artist." Daniel's coffee caught in his throat. Rebecca had said those exact words 100 times. "What else?" Ella demanded. "She brought homemade cookies to every study session. Snickerdoodles, usually. Said her secret ingredient was orange zest." Ella bounced. "She taught me that." She also sang while she studied, quietly under her breath. Old hymns, mostly. Amazing grace. Daniel could hear it now. Rebecca's voice floating from their bedroom while she graded papers. The memory was a knife between his ribs. He noticed other customers watching them. Mrs. Patterson from the pharmacy, Tom from the hardware store, the widower Carter and his daughter, chatting with that new barista. He could practically hear the gossip brewing. Grace's break timer buzzed on her phone. Back to the grind, literally. As she stood, she pulled a pen from her apron pocket and scribbled on a napkin. "My number, in case Ella wants to share more drawings, or if you need anything." Daniel pocketed the napkin, mumbling thanks. Grace squeezed Ella's shoulder gently before returning to her station. They finished their drinks in comfortable silence, Ella humming while she colored. Daniel watched Grace work, efficient, friendly with every customer, but his eyes kept catching her glancing their way. That evening, Ella's campaign began in earnest over spaghetti and meatballs. "Can we invite Miss Grace to church tomorrow?" "No." "Why not?" "We don't know her well enough." "But she knew Mommy." "That doesn't mean—" Daniel stopped, searching for words a 6-year-old would understand. "Just because someone seems nice doesn't mean we invite them into our whole life." but she is nice. And she's lonely. She said her mommy's in heaven and her boyfriend was mean to her. She didn't say he was mean. Leaving someone is mean. Ella stabbed a meatball with conviction. We should invite her for Christmas dinner. Absolutely not. Why? Ella, enough. She crossed her arms, lower lip jutting out in a pout that was pure Rebecca. Mommy would invite her. The words hung between them like a challenge. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, then simply said, "Eat your vegetables." Ella sulked through the rest of dinner, perking up only for their bedtime story. But as Daniel tucked her in, she made one last attempt. "Miss Grace is sad. We're sad. Maybe we could be not sad together? Good night, little angel." That's not an answer. Good night. Hours later, Daniel sat in the dark living room, phone in one hand, Grace's napkin in the other. Her handwriting was neat, confident. Nothing like Rebecca's looping scrawl. His thumb hovered over the digits. What would he even say? Thanks for making my daughter smile? Thanks for bringing up memories I've spent 3 years trying to bury? Thanks for looking like my dead wife but being nothing like her at all? The phone screen dimmed, timing out. He set it aside, napkin still clutched in his other hand. Through the window, snow began falling again, soft and silent. The elementary school auditorium smelled of floor wax and fruit punch. Daniel shifted on the metal folding chair, program clenched in his hands. Parents packed the rows around him, cameras ready. Younger siblings squirming. "She'll be the third angel from the left," he muttered to himself, scanning the stage where kids in bedsheet costumes milled about behind the curtain. "Daniel?" He turned. Grace stood in the aisle, snow still melting in her auburn hair, cheeks pink from the cold. "You came?" "Promised I would." She gestured to the empty seat beside him. "May I?" He slid over, catching her scent. Vanilla and coffee. Nothing like Rebecca's lavender perfume. The lights dimmed. Mrs. Henderson, the music teacher, welcomed everyone with practiced cheer. The curtain creaked open to reveal a lopsided manger and aluminum foil stars dangling from fishing wire. Mary and Joseph shuffled on stage, followed by shepherds dragging stuffed sheep. Then came the angels. Ella's tinsel halo sat crooked, her wings bent from backstage wrestling matches. She scanned the audience, face scrunched in concentration. When she spotted Grace, her whole body lit up. She waved frantically, nearly dropping her cardboard harp. "Third angel from the left. Breaking character," Grace whispered. Daniel found himself smiling. Every year. The play lurched forward. Forgotten lines, missed cues, one shepherd's sheep losing its head mid-scene. Through it all, Ella kept glancing at Grace, her joy radiating past the footlights. During Silent Night, when all the children sang together, Daniel noticed Grace wiping her eyes. "You okay?" "Just, family stuff. Holidays are complicated." The finale arrived with merciful swiftness. Parents erupted in applause. Ella broke formation immediately, wings flapping as she rushed down the steps. She bypassed Daniel entirely, launching herself into Grace's arms. "You came! You really came! Wouldn't miss it, angel girl." Daniel stood awkwardly as other parents squeezed past, some eyeing the scene with curiosity. Ella clung to Grace's hand, dragging her toward the cookie table, chattering about backstage disasters. "Thank you," Daniel said quietly, falling into step beside them, "for keeping your word." "Of course." They collected Ella's coat and backpack from her classroom. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving Main Street pristine white under the streetlights. Ella skipped between them, still wearing her angel wings over her winter coat. "Miss Grace, you should see our Christmas tree." "Daddy let me put all the ornaments on the bottom." "Designed or choice," Daniel defended, "not laziness." "Sure." They walked slowly, Ella's energy gradually winding down from her performance high. At the corner where Grace would turn toward her apartment, she paused. "My father would have hated tonight." The words came sudden, raw. Daniel stopped. Ella still humming ahead. He believed in keeping to your own kind, his words. Grace watched Ella spinning in the snow. Found out the hard way when I brought Marcus home. MBA from Harvard, started his own tech company, volunteered at the youth center. None of it mattered once Dad saw his skin color. Daniel stayed quiet, recognizing the weight of untold story. Marcus was patient at first, said we'd bring Dad around. But after 2 years of slammed doors and returned letters, she shrugged. Marcus finally asked why he should marry into a family that would never accept his children. Couldn't blame him for walking away. Your father's loss. Haven't spoken in 4 years. He lives 40 minutes away, and we're strangers. She kicked at a chunk of ice. Tonight, watching all those families together, sometimes I wonder if I'm defective. Like maybe there's something fundamentally wrong with people who can't hold on to family. That's not... I know what loneliness looks like, Daniel. I see it in your eyes every morning when you order coffee. The truth of it stung. Ella had circled back, tugging Daniel's sleeve. Daddy, I'm cold. We should go, Grace said. Thanks for letting me tag along. She turned away, but Ella grabbed her coat. Will you come to our house for hot chocolate? Ella? Please? Daddy makes it with real chocolate bars. Grace looked to Daniel, clearly not wanting to overstep. He thought of her walking home alone to an empty apartment, thought of his own empty evenings after Ella's bedtime. 1 cup, he heard himself say. It's the least we can do after you sat through that shepherd disaster. Later, much later, after Ella had fallen asleep on the couch, still clutching her program, Daniel found himself at the kitchen table across from Grace. Empty mugs between them, the conversation had drifted from safe topics to deeper water. I was angry at God for 2 years, he admitted. Still am some days. Rebecca was the good one, the faithful one. If he needed someone, should have been me. Grief makes theologians of us all. You still believe? After your father? I believe in something. Maybe not the clean, simple God of childhood, but something. She traced the rim of her mug. Your wife knew that. We talked about it once, about how faith gets messier as you age, but maybe more real too. Daniel glanced at Ella, curled small beneath Rebecca's quilt. His daughter had Grace's business card tucked under her pillow upstairs, had begged to invite her for Christmas dinner, had asked if Miss Grace could be her show and tell subject. The conflict wasn't about resemblance anymore. Grace looked like Rebecca, yes, but she was entirely her own person, scarred, searching, stubbornly hopeful despite the evidence against it. The real question terrified him more. Could he risk letting someone in when his heart was held together with grief and Scotch tape? When Ella's heart was even more fragile? Grace stood to leave, gathering her coat quietly. At the door she paused. I'm not trying to be Rebecca. I couldn't if I tried. I know. I'm just trying to be, I know. She nodded, understanding more than words could carry. After she left, Daniel stood in his doorway, watching her footprints disappear into the night. Daniel woke to chaos. The smell of burning pancakes mixed with Ella's determined humming drifted from the kitchen. He found her standing on a chair, batter dripping from the counter to the floor, a spatula in one hand, and determination on her face. Morning, Daddy. I'm making breakfast. The smoke detector chose that moment to shriek. Daniel grabbed a dish towel, waving it beneath the alarm, while Ella covered her ears. When silence returned, they surveyed the damage together, batter on the cabinets, flour dusting every surface, and 3 blackened discs in the pan. Maybe we start over? Together? Together. They worked side by side, Daniel guiding her small hands as she poured perfect circles onto the griddle. She concentrated hard, tongue poking out, just like Rebecca used to when focusing. The comparison didn't sting as much today. Daddy, can Miss Grace come to church? Daniel flipped a pancake, buying time. Why do you want her to come? She looked sad yesterday. Church makes people less sad. The simplicity of 6-year-old theology. Daniel thought of Grace's words about her father, about fundamental wrongness, about loneliness. "I'll call her." Ella bounced so hard she nearly knocked over the syrup. He dialed while Ella set the table, each ring amplifying his nerves. Grace answered on the fourth. "Daniel, is everything okay?" "We're fine." We wanted to invite you to church. 10 o'clock service at First Methodist." Silence stretched long enough that he wondered if she'd hung up. "You sure?" "Ella insists. She says church makes people less sad." A soft laugh. "Can't argue with that logic." "So you'll come?" "I'll come." Grace stood outside First Methodist, tugging at her dress, the only one she'd kept from her corporate days. Too formal? Not formal enough? She hadn't attended church since Marcus left, hadn't wanted to face the questions, the sympathy, the subtle judgment of her choices. Miss Grace. Ella bounded down the steps, Daniel following. The child grabbed her hand without hesitation. "You came." "Promised I would." Inside, the sanctuary smelled of wood polish and coffee from the fellowship hall. Heads turned as they entered. Daniel Carter, finally back, with his daughter and a woman who looked remarkably like— "Don't mind them," Daniel murmured. Small-town syndrome. They sat 3 rows from the back, Ella between them. The congregation welcomed them warmly, several stopping to squeeze Daniel's shoulder or compliment Ella's dress. Pastor Williams beamed from the pulpit. "Good to see you, Daniel." During the opening hymn, Grace noticed Daniel's hands shaking slightly as he held the hymnal. His voice cracked on "Amazing Grace." Ella sang loudly and off-key, swaying to her own rhythm. Grace found herself smiling, despite the knot in her chest. The sermon focused on second chances, on God's timing versus human timing. Grace wondered if Pastor Williams had planned it, or if the universe enjoyed heavy-handed metaphors. Beside her, Daniel sat rigid, jaw clenched. Ella had discovered the attendance cards and was drawing angels on them. After service, the congregation descended. Mrs. Patterson hugged Daniel. Tom from the hardware store shook his hand. Everyone smiled at Grace with curiosity barely contained behind politeness. "You must join us for fellowship hour," Mrs. Chen insisted. "Actually, we're headed to lunch," Daniel said quickly. "Maybe next week." Outside, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. That was intense. I was going to say nice, but yeah, intense. Murphy's Diner hadn't changed since Grace's childhood. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor, and photos of every graduating class since 1952. They claimed a corner booth, Ella immediately reaching for the crayons. "I used to come here after school," Grace said. "Spent hours in that back booth doing homework, avoiding home." "Strict parents?" "Strict father. Mom tried to soften the edges, but—" She shrugged. He had plans. Very specific plans. Good Christian husband, 2 kids, stay home, host church socials. When I got into Northwestern, he said college would ruin me. When I got promoted to senior management, he said ambition was unbecoming. When I brought Marcus home, he showed his true colors. Rainbow of them. Their food arrived. Burgers, fries, and a chocolate milkshake with 3 straws at Ella's insistence. "I stopped going to church after Rebecca," Daniel admitted, watching Ella attack her chicken tenders. "Couldn't sit in those pews pretending everything made sense. Couldn't sing about joy and victory when I felt nothing but anger." "But you went today." Ella needed normal, routine, and maybe I needed to stop running. Grace reached for a fry, their hands briefly brushing. Neither pulled away immediately. "My father would say I'm being selfish," she said. "Getting attached to another family when I couldn't keep my own? Your father's an idiot." The bluntness surprised them both. Ella looked up from her coloring. "Daddy said a bad word about someone. Sometimes it's okay to call things what they are." That evening, after Grace had gone home, Ella spread her new drawing on the coffee table. 3 stick figures stood beneath a triangle tree decorated with circles. Ornaments, presumably. She'd labeled them carefully. DADYMEGRAC. "Look, it's all of us at Christmas." Daniel studied the drawing, his heart doing complicated things. "We're not alone anymore," Ella announced, then skipped off to brush her teeth. Daniel remained at the table staring at those three figures standing together. The call came Monday morning while Daniel loaded packages into his truck. "I need you on the Peterson route all week," his supervisor barked. "Tommy's out with the flu. Double shifts if you can manage." Daniel stared at his phone. Double shifts meant double pay, but also meant, "Daddy has to work late," he told Ella at breakfast Tuesday. "Mrs. Chen will pick you up, but she smells like mothballs." Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. "Grace, heard you're swamped this week. I can help with Ella." He started typing excuses, then deleted them. Started again, deleted. "You sure?" "Absolutely." "What time does school end?" Wednesday afternoon, Grace waited outside Maplewood Elementary, watching parents and nannies collect their charges. She'd changed from her Starbucks apron into jeans and the sweater she'd bought but never worn. Too casual for the office, too nice for hiding in her apartment. Ella exploded through the doors, backpack bouncing, then stopped short seeing Grace. "Where's Daddy?" "Working late. I'm your ride today." The child's face transformed. She grabbed Grace's hand like they'd done this 100 times. At Daniel's house, a modest two-story that needed paint but had good bones, Grace helped with homework at the kitchen table. Math worksheets, spelling words, a drawing assignment about winter. "Mommy used to help with homework," Ella said, pencil poised over her paper. "She made up songs for spelling. Like SNOW, that's the stuff that makes Daddy go slow." Grace smiled. "That's clever." She was clever about everything. They baked cookies, chocolate chip from a box mix Grace found in the pantry. Ella insisted on adding extra chips and rainbow sprinkles. Flour dusted every surface. The smoke alarm went off twice. "We're terrible at this," Grace laughed, pulling out a tray of slightly burnt edges. "Mommy burned them too. Daddy said it added character." When Daniel arrived at 7, exhausted and covered in a day's worth of December slush, he found them in the living room. Paper snowflakes covered every surface, taped to windows, dangling from the ceiling fan, scattered across the coffee table. Grace held scissors while Ella demonstrated her secret technique for making them extra fancy. He stood in the doorway, keys still in hand, watching his daughter's animated gestures, Grace's patient attention. The house felt alive, warm in a way that had nothing to do with the furnace. "Daddy, look what we made." Ella held up a lopsided snowflake with more holes than paper. "It's beautiful, baby." "Grace says we can make garlands tomorrow. Can she come tomorrow?" He met Grace's eyes. She'd pulled her hair back, a smudge of flour still on her cheek. "If she wants to." Thursday brought more of the same. Friday, Grace had dinner waiting. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and salad, but Daniel nearly wept at not having to cook. "You play guitar," Grace said after dinner, nodding toward the acoustic gathering dust in the corner. "Used to." "Daddy played for Mommy all the time," Ella chimed in. "Love songs and church songs and silly songs about rabbits." "The rabbit songs were your favorite." "Play something," Grace encouraged. "It's been years." "So?" He picked up the guitar, fingers finding familiar frets despite the time gap. The first notes came out uncertain, but muscle memory took over. An old hymn Rebecca loved, then something lighter, Ella humming along. Grace watched from the couch, something soft in her expression. "You should play at church," she said. "Maybe." But he kept playing until Ella fell asleep against Grace's shoulder. Saturday morning arrived crisp and bright, perfect for Maplewood's Christmas market. The town square transformed each December. White tents, twinkling lights, vendors selling everything from hand-carved nativity scenes to suspicious-looking fruitcake. They walked together, but not quite together, Ella between them, pointing at everything. Daniel bought her a knitted hat with reindeer antlers. Grace found a wooden ornament shaped like a snowflake. "For your collection," she told Ella. The carolers started at noon, voices carrying across the square. Silent Night, Joy to the World, songs that usually made Daniel want to leave. Today he stayed. Daniel Carter, is that you actually enjoying yourself? Mrs. Patterson from church stood nearby, husband in tow, studying them with barely concealed interest. Just showing Grace the market. How wonderful. You three make such a lovely picture. After she left, Daniel muttered, The gossip mill starts turning. Let it turn. They bought hot cider from the Lutheran booth, sharing knowing looks when the vendor added a little extra warmth to the adult cups. Ella discovered the petting zoo, insisting on feeding every goat twice. She's happy, Grace observed, watching Ella giggle as a lamb nibbled her fingers. Happier than she's been in years. You too. He considered denying it, then didn't. The ride home came as afternoon faded. Ella conked out 5 minutes in, mouth open, reindeer hat askew. Grace rode quietly, watching the town drift past. She's healing because you let me in. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. The road ahead stretched familiar, but somehow different. I'm scared, he admitted. Of what? Of her getting attached. Of me getting attached. Of losing again. Grace touched his hand on the gear shift, brief but deliberate. Not everything ends in loss, Daniel. He wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe her. The following Saturday arrived with fresh snow and Daniel's stomach in knots. Grace had mentioned the community night all week, her project, her baby, her way of giving back to Maplewood, free cocoa, toys for kids who needed them, local musicians. She'd transformed the Starbucks into something magical. Daddy, hurry up, we're going to be late. Ella bounced by the door, wearing her reindeer hat from the market and a green dress she'd insisted made her look like an elf. It doesn't start for another hour, but Grace needs our help setting up. She did. Daniel knew she did. That's what scared him, how naturally they'd become her support system, how easily she'd become theirs. The Starbucks glowed against the December dusk. Grace had strung lights everywhere, around windows, across the ceiling, wrapped around the coffee bar, paper snowflakes, Ella shrieked, recognizing her own, decorated every surface. A small stage occupied the corner where tables usually sat. You came. Grace appeared from behind a tower of toy donations, wearing an apron that said, Chief Elf, in glittery letters. Ella would have walked here alone if I'd said no. I would have, Ella confirmed, already grabbing an apron from Grace. What's my job? Toy supervisor. Make sure every kid gets something special. Daniel helped move boxes, arrange chairs, test the ancient microphone someone had donated. Other volunteers arrived. Folks from church, teachers from Ella's school, even grumpy Mr. Henderson from the hardware store, mumbling about community spirit while secretly enjoying himself. By 6, the place packed. Families filled every corner, kids sticky with cocoa and cookies, parents chatting over coffee. The toy table drew crowds, Ella directing traffic with serious 6-year-old authority. This teddy bear would be perfect for you, she told a shy toddler. He needs lots of hugs. Grace worked the coffee bar, remembering everyone's orders, making each person feel seen. Daniel watched her navigate the chaos with genuine joy, occasionally catching his eye across the room, winking. The music started at 7. Mrs. Chen from the library on piano, the high school jazz quartet, a gospel singer from First Baptist who made everyone cry with "Oh Holy Night." Your turn, Grace appeared at Daniel's elbow during a break between acts. What? I signed you up. Just one song. Grace, no. Please? For me? Ella materialized, tugging his hand. Please, Daddy. Play the song you played for Mommy. The crowd noticed the discussion, started clapping before he'd agreed. Grace pushed his guitar into his hands. I haven't performed in years, so start now. The walk to the stage felt endless. The stool creaked when he sat. The microphone picked up his nervous breathing. The crowd quieted, expectant. His fingers found the opening chord of Silent Night. The arrangement Rebecca had loved. Simple, stripped down, honest. His voice cracked on the first line, but he pushed through. Silent Night. Holy Night. The cafe fell completely still. Even the espresso machine seemed to pause. His voice, rough from disuse, but full of something raw and real, filled the space. Parents held their children closer. Grace stood near the coffee bar, one hand pressed to her chest, tears sliding freely down her cheeks. Sleep in heavenly peace. The last note hung in the air. Nobody moved. Then someone started clapping, and everyone joined, the sound washing over him like absolution. He stumbled off stage, shaking, straight into Ella's embrace. "That was beautiful, Daddy." Before he could respond, Ella grabbed the microphone he'd abandoned. "Wait! I want to say something." The crowd turned, charmed by the small girl in her elf dress. "Hi, everybody. I'm Ella Carter, and this is my daddy, and that's Grace over there." She pointed. Grace froze, eyes wide. "Grace helps me with homework and makes cookies with me and comes to church with us, and she's pretty, like my mommy was." Daniel started forward, but Ella wasn't done. "My mommy went to heaven when I was little, and I was really sad, and Daddy was really sad, and we missed her lots. But then we met Grace at this Starbucks, and she looks like Mommy, but she's not Mommy. She's Grace, and that's okay because, Ella paused, thinking hard. "Because Grace makes us happy again. She's like my second Mommy." The crowd erupted. Not polite applause, but genuine, moved. Some people are crying enthusiasm. Grace covered her face with both hands. Daniel reached Ella, scooped her up, held her tight enough to memorize the feeling. "Was that okay?" Ella whispered. "That was perfect, baby." They stayed until closing, helping clean up, carrying tired children to cars, distributing the last toys. The snow had started again, fat flakes drifting lazy through streetlight halos. Walking to the truck, Ella between them, Daniel felt something shift. Not healing. That would take more time, but possibility. The chance that broken things could become whole in new ways. "Thank you," he told Grace. "For tonight. For everything." She squeezed his hand in the dark. "This is just the beginning." Ella, drowsy against his shoulder, murmured agreement. The snow kept falling. Their footsteps made the only sound on the empty street. 3 people walking together, casting one shadow. Daniel dared, just for a moment, to imagine this lasting. The next afternoon arrived crisp and bright, December sun bouncing off yesterday's snow. Daniel pulled sugar and flour from cupboards, while Grace helped Ella drag a step stool to the counter. "We're making Grandma Marion's sugar cookies," Ella announced. "She taught Mommy, and Mommy taught Daddy, and now we're teaching Grace." "I should warn you," Grace tied an apron around her waist. "I once burned water." "Nobody burns water," Daniel said. "Want to bet?" Within minutes, the kitchen exploded into chaos. Flour dusted every surface. Ella's enthusiasm with the measuring cups sent sugar cascading across the floor. The electric mixer, set too high, splattered butter onto the ceiling. "Oops," Ella giggled. Grace tried rescuing the situation, reaching for the mixer just as Daniel did. Their hands collided, sending the bowl spinning, coating them both in cookie dough. Ella shrieked with laughter. "You look like snowmen." Daniel wiped dough from his eyes, saw Grace doing the same, and something loosened in his chest. He grabbed a handful of flour. "Don't you dare," Grace started. The flour hit her square in the face. She gasped, then lunged for the sugar bowl. "Food fight," Ella declared, joining with enthusiasm. They battled until the kitchen looked like a bakery had exploded, all 3 covered head to toe in ingredients, laughing until their ribs ached. Daniel couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like this, real, deep, belly-shaking laughter that made everything else disappear. Okay, truce," Grace called, hands raised in surrender. They surveyed the destruction. "Maybe we should actually make cookies now," Daniel suggested. "From scratch," Grace agreed. Again. This time they worked together properly. Grace showed Ella how to roll dough evenly, guiding her small hands. Daniel snapped photos on his phone, Ella's concentrated tongue poking out. Grace's patient demonstrations, both their faces streaked with flour, like war paint. "Perfect," Grace praised, as Ella cut out stars and trees and angels. "You're a natural." While cookies baked, they tackled cleanup, dancing around each other in the small kitchen, finding rhythm in the ordinary task. The timer dinged. Golden cookies emerged, filling the house with vanilla and butter. "Now the tree," Ella bounced. "We saved decorating for today." The living room held their artificial tree, still bare except for lights Daniel had strung half-heartedly. Boxes of ornaments waited, most unopened since Rebecca. Grace hesitated at the threshold. "Should I—" "Stay," Daniel said, "please." They opened boxes carefully. Each ornament carried memory: Ella's first Christmas, their wedding, Rebecca's collection of glass angels. Daniel's hands shook slightly, but Grace's presence steadied him. "Look what I brought." Grace pulled out a small wrapped package. Inside lay a simple wooden angel, paint worn from years of handling. "My mother gave this to me when I was Ella's age. Before she died, I thought maybe it could live here this year." Ella took it reverently. "She's beautiful." "Where should we put her to?" Grace asked. Ella studied the tree, then placed the angel right beside a crystal star, Rebecca's favorite ornament. "There, so they can be friends." Daniel's throat closed. Grace's hand found his, squeezed once, let go. They decorated steadily, Ella chattering about each ornament's story, making up tales for ones she couldn't remember. When they finished, the tree glowed warm and full, melding past and present. "Cocoa time," Ella declared. They settled by the fireplace, mugs warming their hands. Ella wedged herself between them on the couch, recounting her version of the day's flower fight. Her words gradually slowed, exhaustion catching up. "Grace," she mumbled, "will you stay for bedtime story?" "If your dad says it's okay." Daniel nodded. But before he could suggest moving upstairs, Ella had already curled sideways, head pillowing on Grace's shoulder, breathing deep and even. Grace froze, afraid to disturb her. "She never falls asleep that fast," Daniel whispered, "even with me." They sat in firelight, watching Ella dream. The house settled around them, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in 3 years. "I never thought I'd see her this happy again." Grace shifted carefully, meeting his eyes. "You both deserve joy, Daniel. It's not betraying Rebecca's memory to be happy." "How do you know?" "Because the Rebecca you've described would want this. Would want you both to have love and laughter and flower fights and terrible burnt cookies." "Oh, they weren't burnt." "The second batch wasn't." He almost smiled. "She would have liked you." "You think?" "I know." The fire crackled. Ella murmured something about angels. Grace's free hand found Daniel's across the couch cushions. "This feels like the life God wants for us," he admitted, so quiet she almost missed it. Grace squeezed gently. "Then maybe we should stop fighting it." Daniel looked at his daughter, peaceful against Grace's shoulder, at the tree with its mingled ornaments, at this woman who'd walked into their lives and made everything brighter. For the first time since Rebecca's death, he stopped bracing for the next loss, stopped waiting for God to take this away too. Maybe, just maybe, this was his family's second chance at wholeness. The fire burned low, snow began falling again outside. Daniel let himself hope. The next evening brought freezing rain that turned Maplewood streets into glass. Daniel had picked up Ella from after-school care, and they'd stopped at Starbucks for Grace's shift ending. It had become their routine, waiting for Grace to clock out, then deciding on dinner together. 5 more minutes, Grace called from behind the counter, untying her apron. Ella pressed her nose against the window, drawing shapes in the fog her breath made. Daniel checked work emails on his phone, comfortable in the familiar bustle. The door chimed. Grace Elizabeth Thompson. The voice cut through the cafe's warmth like winter wind. Grace froze, apron halfway off. Daniel looked up to see a man in an expensive wool coat, silver hair perfectly styled, jaw rigid with disapproval. "Dad." Grace's voice came out small. Edward Thompson stepped further inside, bringing cold air and something worse, contempt that radiated from every line of his body. His eyes swept over Grace's uniform with disgust. "So, it's true. My daughter, valedictorian of her MBA class, serving coffee. It's honest work." "It's beneath you." Edward's gaze found Daniel and Ella. "And these are the people you've been spending time with?" Several customers looked up from laptops. The evening shift barista backed away. "This is Daniel and his daughter Ella," Grace said, chin lifting. "My friends." Edward's laugh held no warmth. "Friends? Is that what you're calling it?" He studied Daniel's delivery company jacket, worn boots, calloused hands. "Let me guess. Blue collar, widower, looking for someone to raise his child." Daniel stood slowly. "Sir, Don't." Edward dismissed him with a wave. "I know your type. Saw Grace's soft heart and thought you'd found an easy mark." "Dad, stop." Grace moved between them, but Edward grabbed her arm. "You never learn, do you? First that mixed-race boy in college. Thank God I put an end to that disaster. Then Marcus, who at least had the sense to see you weren't worth marrying. And now this?" He gestured at Daniel with revulsion. "Another broken man who'll drag you down to his level?" Grace yanked free. "Daniel is 10 times the man you are. Daniel is a delivery driver raising another man's leftovers." The cafe went silent. Ella's face crumpled. Daniel's hands clenched. "How dare you?" Grace started. "How dare I? I'm trying to save you from yourself. Again." Edward's voice rose. "You think playing house with someone else's family will fill that void inside you? You're pathetic, Grace. Throwing away everything I built for you, everything our family name means, for what? To be some replacement mother to a child who'll never be yours?" Tears streamed down Grace's face, but she didn't break eye contact. "At least Daniel knows how to love his daughter. At least Ella knows she's wanted. Unlike you." Edward's smile turned cruel. "You were wanted, Grace, until you proved you'd rather associate with beneath you that boy's family with their ethnic food and loud music." "Stop." "And now this widower who probably hasn't seen a bank account over 5 figures. Stop. You're an embarrassment. To me, to your mother's memory, to everything the Thompson name represents." Grace shook, fists balled. "Then I don't want your name." "You don't mean that." "I do. I choose them. I choose love over your hatred." Edward's palm cracked across her face. The slap echoed. Ella screamed. Customers gasped. Daniel moved on instinct, pulling Grace behind him. "Get out." Edward straightened his coat. "Gladly. But know this. When he disappoints you, when you're alone again, because men like him always fail, don't come crawling back." He left, bell chiming cheerfully in his wake. Grace touched her reddening cheek. Ella sobbed into Daniel's leg. The entire cafe stared. "I'm sorry," Grace whispered. "I'm so sorry." Daniel gathered Ella up, her face buried in his neck. His own shame burned hot. Edward's words, delivery driver, another man's leftovers, always fail, burrowed deep. "We should go," he managed. The ride home passed in suffocating silence, except for Ella's sniffles. Daniel's knuckles stayed white on the wheel. Grace sat frozen in the passenger seat. At the house, Daniel carried Ella inside. Grace followed uncertainly. Once Ella was in her room, Daniel turned to Grace in the kitchen. His face had shuddered completely. "Your father's right about one thing." "Daniel, no. This was a mistake. I can't put Ella through more pain." "You're not?" "We're not, aren't we?" His voice cracked. "Your father will make your life hell. And Ella, she doesn't deserve to be caught in that crossfire." "So you're giving up? Because of him?" "I'm protecting my daughter. You're protecting yourself." Grace's tears started fresh. "You're scared, and you're using Ella as an excuse." "Maybe I am scared. Maybe I should be. I'm a delivery driver, Grace. I can barely keep our heads above water. Your father's right. What can I offer you?" "Everything," she whispered. "You and Ella are everything. We're not enough. We'll never be enough. It's better if you stay away." From the hallway came a strangled sob. They turned to find Ella in her pajamas, clutching her drawings of Grace. "You're leaving?" she asked Grace. "Because of me? Because I'm not good enough?" "No, sweetie." Grace started toward her. Ella ran back to her room, door slamming. Grace looked at Daniel, devastated. "This is what you're choosing? Her believing she's not worthy of love? Just go." "Daniel, please, just go." Grace left, tears streaming. Daniel heard her car start, pull away, disappear. He sank into a kitchen chair, head in his hands. From upstairs, Ella's muffled crying tore at him. "I can't lose again," he whispered to the empty room. "I can't survive losing again." But sitting there, listening to his daughter's heartbreak, he wondered if protecting them from loss had just guaranteed it instead. The morning after Grace left, silence filled the Carter home like fog. Daniel stood at the stove, scrambling eggs that neither of them would eat. Behind him, Ella sat at the kitchen table, spoon clinking against her cereal bowl in slow mechanical movements. "Not hungry?" he asked without turning around. No answer. He plated the eggs anyway, set them in front of his daughter. She pushed a soggy Cheerio from one side of the bowl to the other. "Will Grace come back?" The question hit him between the shoulder blades. He gripped the counter edge. "We'll be okay, kiddo." That's not what I asked." 6 years old, and she could already see through him, just like Rebecca used to. "Eat your breakfast. School starts soon." Ella stood, bowl untouched. "I'm not hungry." She walked to her room, feet dragging. Daniel stared at the abandoned cereal, milk turning gray, and wondered when he'd become the kind of father who let his daughter go to school with an empty stomach and a broken heart. At work, packages blurred together. Addresses swam. Twice he delivered to the wrong house, had to double back with apologies. His supervisor, Mike, pulled him aside after the third complaint. "You okay, Carter?" "You've been off all week." "Fine, just tired." Mike studied him. "Take the afternoon. Get your head straight." Daniel wanted to argue. They needed the hours, needed the money, but Mike was already walking away. He drove home in silence, radio off. The empty house echoed his footsteps. He tried tidying, fixing the leaky faucet, anything to keep busy. But his hands shook too much to hold the wrench steady. By 5, he'd given up pretending to be productive. He picked Ella up from after-school care, where Mrs. Henderson mentioned she'd been quiet all day. Not like herself at all. At home, Ella went straight to the couch, curling into the corner with her tablet. Daniel made mac and cheese, her favorite, but she only managed 3 bites. "Want to watch a movie?" he offered. She shook her head, eyes never leaving the screen. An hour later, he found her asleep, tablet fallen to the floor. But it wasn't the device that broke his heart. Clutched against her chest was the drawing. 3 stick figures under a Christmas tree. Daddy, me, and Grace. The paper was wrinkled from being held too tight. Daniel lifted her gently, carried her to bed. She stirred, mumbled something that sounded like Grace, then settled back into sleep. He tucked the blanket around her shoulders, kissed her forehead. Back in the living room, he picked up the drawing. Grace's stick figure had yellow hair, a red dress, and a huge smile. She'd drawn hearts floating around all 3 of them. His chest caved in. At 10 o'clock, he grabbed his keys. He couldn't stay in that house another minute, couldn't breathe through the weight of what he'd done. 20 minutes later, he stood at Maplewood Cemetery's iron gates. They were locked, visiting hours long over. But he knew the gap in the fence from too many midnight visits those first months after. Rebecca's headstone sat beneath an oak tree, its branches bare now, scratching at the December sky. He hadn't been here in over a year, hadn't been able to face it. "Hey, Beck," Wind answered. He sat on the frozen ground back against the stone. The cold seeped through his jeans immediately. "I messed up. Again." A branch creaked overhead. "There's this woman, Grace. She's—" "God, Beck, she's nothing like you and everything like you at the same time. Does that make sense?" Silence. "Ella loves her, calls her second mommy, and I let her in, let them both in. And then I threw it away because I'm a coward." His voice cracked. "Her father said things, true things. I am just a delivery driver. I am broken. I can barely take care of Ella, let alone someone else. But Grace didn't care about any of that. She wanted us." The tears came then, hot against the frozen air. "Am I betraying you? By wanting her? By letting Ella want her?" The oak tree shuddered in a gust of wind. "Or am I betraying God by shutting out what He sent? Because that's what Marion thinks. Your mom thinks Grace is an answer to prayer, my prayer. The ones I've been too angry to say." He pressed his palms against his eyes. "I've been so angry, Beck. At God, at you for leaving, at myself for not being enough to save you. And now Grace shows up and Ella's laughing again, and I'm terrified. Terrified of losing again, terrified of not being enough again." His shoulders shook. "What if I fail her like I failed you? What if she gets sick? What if she leaves? What if? I'm drowning in what ifs, and meanwhile, Ella's upstairs thinking she's not worth loving." The admission ripped from his throat. "I'm failing our daughter. I'm so scared of her getting hurt that I'm the one hurting her." Wind whistled through the headstones. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. Daniel sat there until his legs went numb, tears freezing on his cheeks, staring at Rebecca's name carved in granite. No answers came, no sign, no peace. Just him, the cold stone, and the terrible possibility that he'd thrown away their second chance at happiness because he was too broken to believe they deserved it. Grace hadn't slept, the apartment's walls pressed close, trapping Edward Thompson's voice inside her skull. "Lowering yourself." Another broken man, repeating mistakes. She'd paced the small living room until 3 a.m., then given up and made tea she didn't drink. Now, at 7 in the morning, she sat at her kitchen table staring at a photo on her phone. Ella covered in flour, Daniel laughing in the background, 3 days ago, a lifetime ago. Her phone rang. Dad. She let it ring twice, 3 times, then answered. Grace Elizabeth Thompson. Her full name, the weapon he'd wielded since childhood. Dad. "I've been thinking about last night, about your behavior." She closed her eyes. "I want you to come home. Today, we'll fix this mess you've created." "No." The word surprised them both. "Excuse me?" "I said no. You're being ridiculous. That man, that child, they're not your responsibility. You have a reputation to consider." "Whose reputation? Yours?" "Don't take that tone." I'm 30 years old, Dad. When do I get to live my own life? When you stop making foolish choices. First Marcus, now this widower. Marcus was a good man. He was. Black, say it, he was black, and that's why you hated him. Silence crackled through the line. "I was protecting you." From what? Love? Happiness? From a life of struggle, from people judging you. The only person who judged me was you. Her voice stayed steady, calm. She'd screamed these words in her head 1,000 times. Speaking them felt like breathing after being underwater. "You're making a mistake, Grace. That man can't give you anything. He's beneath you. Daniel is kind. He's faithful. He loves his daughter more than anything. That's not beneath me. That's everything I want. You're throwing your life away for someone else's child. Ella needs—" "You're not her mother." The words hit like ice water. "No, I'm not. But I love her like she's mine." "Love." He spat the word. "You loved Marcus too. Look how that ended. It ended because you made him feel worthless, Because you made me choose. And you're choosing again, them over family. Grace stood, walked to the window. Snow fell in lazy spirals. I'm not choosing them over family, Dad. I'm choosing love over prejudice, faith over fear. I'm choosing the life God wants for me, not the one you've mapped out. God wouldn't want. How would you know what God wants? When did you last pray for anything except your stock portfolio? Sharp intake of breath. If you walk away from this family, I'm not walking away. You are. You've been walking away since I was 12 and asked why we never invited the Martinez family to dinner. This conversation is over. Yes, it is. She hung up first. Her hands trembled, but something in her chest expanded, like she'd been breathing through a straw for years and suddenly found clear air. She texted her friend Anna, "Can I come over tonight?" The reply was instant. Always. That evening, Grace sat in Anna's living room, a room that smelled like vanilla candles and felt like safety. They'd been friends since high school, through Grace's corporate years, through Marcus, through everything. He hung up on me. Grace pulled her knees to her chest. Good riddance. Anna. What? Your father's been a controlling racist for years. You've finally stood up to him. But now I have nobody. Dad's gone. Daniel pushed me away. Ella probably hates me. That little girl doesn't have a hateful bone in her body. She thinks I left because of her. I know she does. Anna moved closer on the couch. Then why aren't you fighting for them? Daniel made it clear. Daniel's scared. You said so yourself. The man lost his wife. He's terrified of losing again. So I should what? Force myself back into their lives? No, but you shouldn't give up either. Grace wiped her eyes. I don't know what God wants from me. Have you asked him? The question hung between them. Not really. I've been too angry. At God? At everyone, Dad, Daniel, myself. Anna squeezed her hand. You know what I remember about you in high school? You never gave up. On anything. That calculus class that made everyone cry? You got an A. When Marcus's family needed help with immigration paperwork? You learned immigration law. You don't quit, Grace. Maybe I should. Maybe Dad's right. Maybe I'm just inserting myself where I don't belong. Or maybe God put you exactly where you belong. They prayed together then, kneeling on Anna's soft carpet. Grace's words came slowly at first, then faster, pouring out grief and love and confusion and hope. Show me the way. Give me strength. Help me love them, even if they can't love me back. And help me forgive my father, even if he never changes. When she opened her eyes, Anna was crying too. What? You already know what to do. Grace nodded slowly. She did know. Wait, love, trust. Don't give up. Daniel and Ella were worth fighting for, even if that meant fighting through silence, even if it meant standing still while God worked on Daniel's heart. She'd spent years letting her father's voice drown out God's. Not anymore. Tomorrow she'd go back to work at Starbucks. She'd smile, she'd serve coffee, and she'd trust that if God meant for them to be a family, nothing, not Edward Thompson's prejudice, not Daniel's fear, not her own doubt, could stop it. Saturday arrived cold and bright, frost painting the windows like lace. Daniel stood at the kitchen counter, watching Ella push scrambled eggs around her plate. We don't have to go tonight? But Grace worked so hard on it. Ella's voice was small. She planned everything. She might not even be there. She will be, she promised the families. Daniel's chest tightened. Of course Grace would keep her promise to the community, even after everything. Please, Daddy? He couldn't refuse those eyes. The Starbucks parking lot was already full when they arrived. Through the windows, warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. Paper snowflakes covered the glass. Children's laughter drifted out each time the door opened. Daniel held Ella's hand as they walked in. The cafe had been transformed, tables pushed aside to make room for a gift station. Red and green streamers twisted from the ceiling. The smell of hot chocolate and fresh cookies filled the air. And there was Grace. She stood behind a table stacked with wrapped presents, helping a mother with 3 children pick out toys. Her smile was real, reaching her eyes as she knelt to hand a stuffed bear to the youngest child. "She's here," Ella whispered. "Yeah, kiddo, she's here." They found seats in the corner. Daniel watched Grace work, greeting each family like they were the most important people in the world. No trace of the pain he'd caused. No sign she'd been crying for days. "Daniel," Margaret Wilson from church appeared at their table. "So glad you came. That Grace is something special, isn't she?" "She organized all this?" "Every bit. Called local businesses for donations. Wrapped hundreds of gifts herself. Even got the Petersons to donate their restaurant's leftover food for the meal." Margaret leaned closer. "She's good for you and Ella." "Don't throw it away." Before Daniel could respond, she was gone, bustling toward the coffee station. More neighbors stopped by their table. Each one mentioned Grace. How kind she was, how she'd brought the community together, how happy Ella looked when Grace was around. Tom Bradley, whose construction business Daniel sometimes did deliveries for, was blunt. "You're an idiot if you let that woman go." Tom --. "My wife left me once. My fault. Too proud to admit I was scared. Took me 6 months to win her back. Hardest 6 months of my life." Daniel watched Grace across the room. She was helping an elderly woman carry cups of cocoa to a table of kids. The woman patted Grace's cheek, saying something that made Grace's eyes glisten. "Daddy, can I go help?" "I don't think—" But Ella was already gone, weaving through the crowd toward the gift table. Daniel's breath caught as Grace saw her coming. For a moment, Grace's carefully maintained composure cracked. Pure love crossed her face before she schooled it back to polite warmth. Ella threw her arms around Grace's waist. From across the room, Daniel saw Grace's lips move, saw Ella shake her head, clutch tighter. Grace knelt, eye level with his daughter, hands gentle on Ella's shoulders. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw Ella's face crumple, saw Grace pull her close, saw his daughter's lips form, words that looked like, "Don't forget us." Grace's response was clear even from a distance. "Never." A small boy tugged on Grace's sleeve. Maybe 4 years old, clothes worn but clean. Grace turned to him, still holding Ella's hand. The boy's mother stood behind him, exhaustion written in every line of her body. Single mom, Daniel guessed, probably working 2 jobs. Grace helped the boy pick out a fire truck, then quietly slipped a gift card into the mother's hand. The woman's eyes filled. She shook her head, but Grace folded the woman's fingers around the card, said something that made her laugh through tears. The little boy hugged Grace's legs, his voice carried across the cafe. "You're like my Christmas angel." Grace lifted him up, whispered something that made him giggle. When she set him down, he ran back to his mother, clutching his fire truck like treasure. Ella stayed by Grace's side, helping hand out gifts, refilling cookie plates. They moved together like they'd been doing this for years. Natural. Easy. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from his mother-in-law. Saw the pictures on Facebook. "You 3 look like a family." 3. Marion had already claimed Grace. The evening wound down slowly. Families trickled out, arms full of gifts, bellies full of food. Grace started cleaning up, Ella right beside her, stacking chairs without being asked. Daniel finally moved, grabbing a trash bag, working silently. They cleaned around each other, not speaking, but the rhythm was there. Pass the broom, hold the dustpan, stack the chairs. Like a dance they all knew the steps to. "Thank you for coming," Grace said quietly as they finished.
Ella wanted...
"Thank you for coming," she repeated, looking directly at him this time. Outside, snow had started falling. Ella was already drooping, exhausted from the evening. Grace walked them to the truck, helped buckle Ella in. "Grace?" Ella's voice was thick with sleep. "Yes, sweetheart? You really won't forget us?" "I could never forget you, either of you." She kissed Ella's forehead, closed the door gently. Daniel stood by the driver's side, keys in his hand, Words stuck in his throat. "She's healing," Grace said softly. "Don't let my presence stop that." "Grace?" "Good night, Daniel." She walked back toward the cafe, shoulders straight despite everything. Daniel drove home through quiet streets, Ella sleeping in the back seat, her soft snores filling the silence. In the rearview mirror, he could see her face, peaceful for the first time in days. The only person pushing Grace away was himself. The only person breaking his daughter's heart was him. The only person standing between them and happiness was sitting behind this steering wheel, gripping it like a lifeline, too scared to let go and reach for something better. Rebecca would be so disappointed in him. No, that wasn't right. Rebecca would understand the fear. But she'd tell him what she always told him when he was scared. Faith means moving forward even when you can't see the whole path. He pulled into the driveway, carried Ella inside, tucked her into bed. She mumbled something about angels and grace and Christmas. Daniel sat on the edge of her bed watching her sleep and made a decision. Christmas Eve arrived cold and bright. Daniel stood outside Starbucks, heart hammering against his ribs. Through the window he could see the cafe packed for the final night of the toy drive. Grace moved between tables, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "You sure about this, Daddy?" Ella squeezed his hand. "No," he squeezed back. "But we're doing it anyway." The bell chimed as they entered. Grace looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she turned away, busying herself with the coffee machine. Daniel found the manager, whispered his request. The man's eyebrows rose, but he nodded, patting Daniel's shoulder. They waited through the evening festivities. Ella helped serve cookies, staying close to Daniel this time, throwing longing glances at Grace. The crowd was bigger than ever. Seemed like half of Maplewood had turned out. Finally, as things wound down, the manager clinked a spoon against a mug. "Folks, before we close, someone has something to share. Daniel?" The cafe quieted. Daniel's legs felt like water as he walked to the small, cleared space by the counter. Ella stayed by the door clutching her coat. He cleared his throat. Once, twice. "Most of you know me, know my story." His voice cracked on the first words. 3 years ago, I lost my wife, Rebecca. Since then, I've been—" He paused, searching. "Surviving." Not living, just surviving. Someone sniffled. He couldn't look to see who. "Few weeks back, my daughter said something that stopped everyone in this cafe. She pointed at Grace and said she looked like her mommy." Grace's hand flew to her mouth. She started to move toward the back room, but the manager gently touched her arm, keeping her there. She was right. The resemblance is there, but that's not why Grace matters. Daniel's voice grew stronger, more certain. "After Rebecca died, I shut down. Told myself I was protecting Ella, but really I was protecting myself. Building walls so high that nothing could get in. No joy, no hope, no—" He swallowed hard. "No love." The cafe was tomb silent now. Even the coffee machines seemed to hold their breath. Then Grace walked into our lives. Not walked. God placed her there. And suddenly Ella was laughing again, drawing again. She had light in her eyes I thought was gone forever. Tears ran down his face now, but he didn't wipe them away. I got scared. When things got complicated, when people said things, I pushed Grace away. Told myself it was for Ella's good, but I was lying. He turned to Grace directly. She stood frozen, tears streaming. "Grace, you look like Rebecca, yes, but God didn't send you to replace what I lost." His voice broke completely. He had to stop, breathe, start again. "He sent you to remind me that love isn't over, not for me, not for Ella, and not for you. I'm sorry I pushed you away. I'm sorry I let fear win. I'm sorry I—" "Daddy!" Ella's voice cut through his words. She stood beside him now, looking up with Rebecca's eyes. "Can I say something?" He nodded, unable to speak. Ella turned to Grace, her small voice carrying through the silent cafe. "Miss Grace, Daddy was scared you'd leave like Mommy did. Not 'cause she wanted to, but she had to go to heaven. He thought if he made you leave first, it wouldn't hurt as bad. Several people were openly crying now. But it hurt anyway. It hurt him, and it hurt me, and I think it hurt you too. Grace nodded, hand still over her mouth. So please, Ella's voice wobbled, please stay with us. We need you, and I think maybe you need us too. Grace moved then, crossing the cafe in quick steps, dropping to her knees in front of Ella. Oh, sweetheart! Ella threw her arms around Grace's neck. Please don't leave. Please. I promise I'll be good. I'll clean my room and eat my vegetables and— No, baby, no. Grace pulled back, cupping Ella's face. You're already perfect. You hear me? Perfect. She looked up at Daniel, who stood there shaking. Both of you are. Daniel dropped to his knees beside them. Grace, I'm so sorry. Can you forgive? She pulled him into the embrace, the three of them holding each other while the cafe erupted. Applause, cheers, someone started singing Silent Night, and others joined in. They stayed there, kneeling on the coffee-stained floor, holding each other like they'd never let go. Grace whispered something Daniel couldn't hear over the noise, but he felt it in his bones. Family. The manager started passing out tissues. Someone shouted Merry Christmas. Others called out blessings. The whole community seemed to exhale together like they'd all been holding their breath for this moment. When they finally stood, Ella between them, holding both their hands, Daniel saw Edward Thompson in the corner, Grace's father. The man's face was unreadable, but he hadn't left. That was something. This isn't about romance, Daniel said quietly, just for Grace. It's about healing, she finished. Faith. Beginning again. Together? She squeezed his hand. Together. Snow fell like powdered sugar through the dawn light, dusting Maplewood in fresh white. Daniel woke to the sound of Ella's feet padding down the hallway. Daddy! It's Christmas, and it's snowing. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. For the first time in 3 years, Christmas morning didn't feel like something to survive. Morning, kiddo. Want to help with pancakes? Can we make them shaped like snowmen? We can try. They worked side by side in the kitchen, Ella standing on her step stool, carefully pouring batter, while Daniel flipped. The snowman pancakes looked more like clouds, but Ella declared them perfect. The doorbell rang at 8 sharp. She's here! Ella raced to the door, throwing it open before Daniel could catch up. Grace stood on the porch, cheeks pink from cold, holding a covered pan. Merry Christmas, Carters. You came. Ella wrapped around her legs. Of course I came. I brought cinnamon rolls. The kitchen filled with the smell of cinnamon and butter. They ate breakfast together, Ella chattering about Santa and snow angels and whether reindeer liked cinnamon rolls. Grace caught Daniel's eye over Ella's head, and they shared a smile that said everything words couldn't. Present time. Ella dragged them to the living room where a modest tree stood, decorated with ornaments old and new. This one first. Grace handed Ella a wrapped box. Ella tore through the paper, gasping at the porcelain doll inside. It had auburn hair and a green velvet dress. She's beautiful. She looks like— Ella stopped, glancing between Grace and the doll. She looks like both of you. Grace's eyes welled. That's what I hoped. My turn. Ella produced a lumpy package wrapped in construction paper. I made this at school. Grace unwrapped it carefully, preserving the paper covered in Ella's drawings. Inside was a clay ornament painted with 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow star. The words, Our Family, were written in shaky 6-year-old handwriting. Grace pressed the ornament to her chest. Oh, Ella, do you like it? The teacher helped with the star, but I did the people all by myself. It's perfect. Can we hang it on the tree right now? They found the perfect spot, front and center. Daniel lifted Ella so she could hang it herself. There, Ella said. Now it's official. After presents, books for Daniel, art supplies for Ella, a scarf Grace had been eyeing at the Christmas market, they bundled up for the walk to town square. Can I run ahead? Ella asked, already bouncing. "Stay where we can see you." She raced through the snow, spinning in circles, catching snowflakes on her tongue. Grace linked her arm through Daniel's. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For being brave yesterday. For choosing hope over fear. You're the brave one, standing up to your father, not giving up on us." "We're both brave then." "All three of us." The town square buzzed with families gathering for the tree lighting. Hot chocolate stations steamed in the cold air. Children threw snowballs while parents chatted. The enormous pine tree stood dark in the center, waiting. Grace. They turned. Edward Thompson stood 10 feet away, hands in his coat pockets. His usual stern expression had given way to something else, not quite soft, but less stone. Grace's arm tightened on Daniel's. "Father." He nodded at her, then at Daniel. Didn't speak, but didn't turn away either. Progress, maybe, or at least not regression. "We should get closer," Grace said, not breaking eye contact with her father. She nodded once, acknowledging his presence without seeking his approval. Then she turned toward the tree, toward their future. Mayor Harrison's voice boomed through the speakers. "Welcome, Maplewood, to our annual tree lighting. This year, we've asked a special family to flip the switch. Daniel and Ella Carter and Grace Thompson, whose service to our community through the Starbucks Outreach Program has touched us all." The crowd parted, nudging them forward. Ella grabbed both their hands, pulling them to the platform where the switch waited. "On 3. The mayor announced. 1. The crowd joined. 2. 3. Together they pushed the lever. The tree exploded with light, thousands of white bulbs spiraling up to the golden star on top. The crowd erupted in cheers. Someone started, "O Holy Night," and soon everyone was singing. Ella stared up at the star, transfixed. In the glow of the lights, with snow falling around them and the whole town singing, she whispered something so quiet only Daniel and Grace heard. "Mommy, we're okay now. We're not alone anymore." Daniel's throat closed. Grace squeezed his hand tighter. Ella looked up at them, snow in her eyelashes. "She knows, right? Mommy knows we're happy?" "She knows, baby," Daniel managed. "Good." Ella went back to watching the star. "I think she sent Grace to us, like a Christmas present that took a while to deliver." Grace made a sound between a laugh and a sob. Daniel pulled both of them closer. This wasn't a replacement of the past. Rebecca would always be part of them, woven into their story. This was something new. A God-given chapter written in hope and held together by choice, by courage, by love, that knew loss and chose to grow anyway. The crowd kept singing. Snow kept falling, and 3 people who'd been broken in different ways stood whole together, hands linked, hearts full, finally home. If you enjoyed the story, I hand-picked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.